I used to absolutely revere Oxford. I applied twice because I still really wanted to go there and only there after I was rejected the first time, and I really thought it was this bastion of intelligentsia where all the best people went, it could do absolutely no wrong, and it was the perfect place. Now I've been there for a term, I've really seen the good, the bad and the ugly, so I want to talk about all of those things in the review. We'll go through all the categories. We'll start off with the academic stuff, we'll also talk about the social stuff, we'll talk about the Oxford stuff in general, the college system, what it's like as a city, but please do use the timestamps if there's a specific thing you want to look at. And stay to the end for an overall conclusion of this whole term, a ranking, how I would score it out of 10, and things I want to work on for next term in order for it to be better. Of course, everyone's experience will be very different, so although I'll maybe talk about things that I've heard from other people, this will all be my personal opinions and my personal experiences as someone who's just finished the first term doing classics at Trinity College, Oxford. But let's start with the academic stuff. We'll talk about the actual course structure, then the workload or intensity, and then we'll talk about the teaching, the tutors, the professors, everything like that. So, my course structure, what was it like? The first thing to say for classics was everything was in person, which was absolutely brilliant. That was very useful because there was a lot of contact hours, and I'll tell you exactly what we had. There were two languages in classics, Latin and Greek, and I'd come in with Greek knowledge, so we had one Greek class a week, which was just to top up our Greek knowledge. And then, because I was learning the other language, Latin, we had Latin classes every single day. So before anything else, we had 6 hours of language learning contact hours a week. Then on top of that, we had one piece of written work that we needed to do a week, and then you would have a tutorial going through it, in my case last term, with 2 other people, so there were 3 of us in that tutorial group. And then, every other week, I had 2 other tutorials. One of them was about translating, and the other one was about ancient history. So to sum it up, every single week I would have these 6 hours of language classes, and a 1 hour of tutorials, so that's at least 7 hours. And then the next week I would have 9 hours because I would have that extra hour of translation and the extra hour of ancient history. There'll be plenty of stuff in my review that will be quite damning, I think, but the course is something I'm absolutely head over heels with. I'm so pleased with how it's turned out. I'm on this very specific course, as I've just talked about, where I already have Greek and I don't have Latin, and I'm the only person doing classics in the whole of Oxford undergraduates who have that combination, and they have accommodated me so well. There are plenty of people who maybe have both languages already, so that means they can just be in a class with other people who have both languages already, so the teacher can teach them as if they know all of it. And similarly, there are plenty of people that have done Latin before and learning Greek for the first time, so they can be in a class with people that are in that exact combination, so their teachers can teach them Greek as if they already know Latin. And I was slightly worried about how it was going to be for me, because I have done Greek before, but I was learning Latin from scratch, and so I was expecting to be in a class with people who have never done Latin before, and that means had done neither of them before, because I'm the only person who has done Greek without Latin. Everyone else who hasn't done Latin hasn't done Greek, so they've done nothing. And that would have been absolutely fine. But they have sorted me out this amazing thing where I'm in a class with third years who had, when they joined, done none, out of their options picked up Greek first, and so now are in the same Greek position as me, and we're all learning Latin for the first time. And that means our teacher can teach us as if we all already know Greek, as we do, and so teach us the Latin stuff, linking it in the right way, using bits of Greek grammar that all the class will understand so we can move through stuff faster. And that is absolutely incredible. There will be no other university that could do that for me, because even if it's so rare, they would just put me with everyone else, but they clearly have experience of some of this before, and this is such a great combination. It's really weird being with third years. It also feels quite cool, but it's just amazing. I'm so grateful. It's such a brilliant solution, not even something I could have thought of in my head. But that's a really good example to show that Oxford really do care about you as individuals and will find something for you that works. So in conclusion, my Latin classes, which are every single day at 10 AM, and a big part of my week, that's basically over half of my contact hours, a huge success. I'm honestly so grateful, and it works out really, really amazingly for me. Let's move on to the second part of the course, which are these 1 hour a week of the subject you've done before. So I've done Greek before, so it's just topping up our Greek class. This I'm obviously just in the normal thing, because everyone else who's done Greek has also done Latin, but that doesn't really make a difference. I'm just in a class with first years. So that's also quite nice, because other people are in the Latin class or their other class with people in their year group from other colleges, but for me I'm with third years, so it's nice to meet some other classicists. That's only once a week, 1 hour out of my 9, so it's not a big part. It's absolutely fine, I've made some friends in the class, but there's not too much to say about that because that's just 1 hour in comparison to the other one, which is every single day. This 1 hour a day though is an 8:45 start. So on my Thursday, when it is it does feel like a shock to the system because you have to get up much earlier, because that's the one day a week you have to get up an hour and 15 minutes earlier because my other classes start at 10. And also for this 8:45 it's further away. So whilst my 10 o'clock classes, my college Trinity is so close that I can literally leave 5 minutes before and get into the classroom on time. For my Greek stuff, I always have to remember that I can't even just be there at 8:40 waking up ready to leave. I've got to be there much earlier in order that I can get to a different part of Oxford. But that's no problems. I'm just grateful it's that way round, because some people have 8:45s every single day and then their 1 hour a week is at 10 o'clock. And that just means they have to be up at 8:45 every day. So I'm very, very happy with how mine have turned out. The 10 o'clock time's also perfect. But there we go, that's all the language learning we have to do. And that's just a prerequisite for then doing the essays, because once we're doing the essays, we are expected to look at the text we're looking at, for example, the book, in the original. So we're not just looking at an English translation. If I've done the Greek before, we're expected to be able to read a bit of the Greek and be looking at that as opposed to anything else once we're making our essays, making our quotes, stuff like that. But that's another thing that's really good about classics. Because you're in classes with people from other colleges, you don't feel like you just know people from your college. And that's not the case in many subjects. Because it's language learning, they spread you around. But in other subjects where that's not a thing, you're just in these tutorials with people in your college. So that's really nice, and I definitely feel slightly more part of the wider Oxford community because of the way these classics, language learning lessons go. I'm also really, really happy with the essays that we've had to do this term. As we've talked about, there's kind of two parts of classics, the Greek stuff and the Latin stuff. And this term, our essays have been about the Greek stuff, which works really well for me because I've done the Greek stuff before and I'm learning the Latin stuff from scratch. There's another classicist who's in my college who, for example, has done the Latin stuff before but has never done the Greek stuff before. And I think that would be much worse this term when you're coming in with all your previous Latin knowledge, but then you're expected to do Greek essays about Greek subjects, Greek books, whatever, before you've done a lot of the language in Greek in order to get to such a good stage. As opposed to, for me, I've come in with all my Greek knowledge before, I could top that up just before starting, and then I can use all that knowledge for this term. And then, as I'm doing Latin every day, by the time next term comes to the Latin term, I think I'll be able to attack that much better, because I just feel like I've got used to it and I could do the stuff I knew first before anything else. So again, I think that's a really good thing that is unique to my situation, and it just so happens that my college does it in this order. They do the Greek stuff first, then the Latin stuff, then mixed for the rest of the terms. I guess that does make sense because chronologically the Greeks came first, then the Romans, but I know every college does it slightly differently. Some of my friends from the language classes tell me that the essays they do and the tutorials they do are something that we might do later on, their mixed stuff. And that's something I've realised. It actually does make a big difference which college you go to. Of course, you all have the same exams at the end, but the stuff you'll do term on term could be in a different order, and even the stuff within the same content you would do can also be very varied. Not that it's something you can predict too much in advance, and it's not something that you can really know about and choose, but it does make a difference. But the way I think my college does it, I'm really, really happy with. Just in general, I think it's sensible, but also for my specific combination, I could do all the stuff I know first, that I feel I could prep for in advance, as opposed to doing new stuff, and then having prep for stuff that would be for second term, and that just wouldn't seem that logical for me. An example of things that my college might do that others won't, and vice versa, is all these optional tutorials. When I said that I have 2 extra tutorials every fortnight, these are things that only my college offer internally. They're never necessarily examined on in the end, but the college just thinks is useful for the students. And a lot of other colleges will do this about different things. So one of those was about translating stuff, which would kind of be useful for the essays we were doing this term. All our essays were about the Iliad, and so in these translation classes, we would be with one of our tutors, and we would have to maybe translate a bit of Homer in advance, and then we would come to the class, talk about things we couldn't translate, and he would help us get better at translating. So then when it came to different bits we needed to read for our essays, we would be better at that. And that was definitely really useful, because although I'd looked at the Iliad before, I hadn't done that much translating, so it was useful to go to these tutorials every fortnight and get stronger at that, and that was actually very useful. The other thing we had with the same tutor was ancient history stuff. This is just because the tutor is primarily an ancient historian, and he is encouraging us to pick it as one of our optional options in third term. First term's the Greek stuff, as I've talked about, second stuff's the Roman stuff, and then you kind of have a few choices about what to do. And so he's trying to give us a bit of an introduction to, number 1, encourage us to do it, and number 2, just see, for us, if this will be our kind of thing. Of course, because this is optional, you can prepare a lot less for it, and you spend no more than like an hour, maybe 2 hours preparing for this, but it'll be about a different thing every time. So for example, different ancient Greek historians, and he would set us a task and we would research a bit and come to the tutorial prepared with some stuff. But it's much more informal because, of course, it's technically optional. So if you don't prepare that well for it, it's not too much of a big deal. But that's kind of a basis of all the content I had this term. Of course, the stuff at the start is the really compulsory, important stuff, the language. That's kind of what they want you to focus on in the first few terms. Of course, the essays and the tutorials, which are then to talk about the essays, are also important. And then we have the things that weren't exactly optional for us, but were optional for the college to choose to provide for us, if that makes sense. So let's go on to the workload and how stressful each of these parts were. Of course, fundamentally, you have to be up, out, ready to learn Latin every single day from 10 to 11, which is a big time commitment. And we were going quite fast in the class. I would personally say we're already past A-level standard, and that was kind of from complete beginner. They expected us to do some stuff in advance, which they set in their summer holidays, and so no one was coming in from scratch, but we recapped that quickly and moved on very fast. But at the same time, this is a class of people that have all done one ancient language before, Greek, so none of us are coming in completely as learning languages from scratch, and also we've committed 40 hours over the term, so I'm not even sure if the pace is that fast. It definitely felt intense, and I'm not sure how many hours you would have to get to A-level standard normally. It definitely was a very condensed time period, but there we go, it was pretty intense. Because I'd done quite a lot of work personally during the end of the summer holiday, during like gap year for example, I didn't really do basically any Latin outside of these classes. The 1 hour a day, and because it was every day Monday to Friday, felt like you were always quite warmed up for it. And personally for me, I didn't have to do much more. I learnt the vocab in advance, for example, of all the vocab lists. And the grammar we were doing every single day, and I felt that was enough for me. There was no compulsory homework, but a lot of other people who maybe hadn't done so much Latin, either before the programme or weren't as confident or whatever it was, would definitely do extra Latin, maybe half an hour every day as well as the lesson itself. So even once they leave the class, they still have work that they would set themselves to do because they felt that was what's necessary. But I felt the Latin this term was doable. It was intense, and once you go into the class, they don't waste time on vocab tests, they don't waste time really on reviewing these kind of things that they expect you to know. It's just about question after question after question, basically translating each sentence on the page. And the teacher in our class just chose someone at random for every sentence. We would see if we could do it, talk about it. That was really good because it's not as if in school you can put your hand up and only go for the ones you're confident in. You could get any question. And that meant, for me, I thought all of us were better because half the time we get questions we can do, but half the time we get questions that naturally we wouldn't volunteer ourselves for, but you have to solve it, or he helps you out or whatever, and you get it done. Very quickly, you stop being scared or upset about getting stuff wrong because you see these people every single day, your classmates and the teacher, and so much is getting wrong so much of the time, it's really not a problem. So in school for me, I definitely was that person that in Greek class, if I didn't know something, I would be tentative about putting my hand up and I wouldn't want to embarrass myself. Here it's just not a choice. And very quickly you just get used to that, which I think is brilliant, because that's exactly how you want to be. Not afraid to ask questions, not afraid to get stuff wrong. So that was really good. I guess a lot of this will depend on the exact teacher you get, but our teacher was really amazing. I think the class went at a great pace, but he also made sure we were all there. And again, there was never any judgment. If people didn't know stuff, or even if it was something basic that we covered a long time ago that people were getting wrong, there was never an idea of frustration or embarrassment from the teacher or anything like that, which again is really, really cool. And that's something that's very different about university, even though it does feel like we're in school, because at 10 AM every day we have to be in this classroom, which is not the same for many other degrees. That is something that seems to make Classicsy quite schooly. Not that we got that much homework, but if we ever did get some and people didn't do it, you never get in trouble, you never get shouted at, you don't even get a passive-aggressive sigh or anything like that. It really is the case that the teacher is just there teaching you the stuff, and it's your responsibility. But what I felt was most of the time that made sure we all did it because we wanted to work hard for ourselves, and also we appreciated the kind of attitude the teacher had towards us. And maybe that's also to do with the fact that most of the class was third years as well, so they understand how Oxford works, they understand what they need to do. But I would say that was the same even in my other class, my once-a-week Greek class, which was with first years, so I'm not too sure. I think that's just a university thing. But going on to the other class, my Greek class, Again, we had a teacher that was really good and was very chill. He didn't really care if we got stuff wrong, which was brilliant. In this class, we did have weekly tests. So the 1 hour class, after a maybe 5 or 10 minute test, becomes even shorter. Some people definitely took liberties and came late because the class was so early. So this hour often felt much shorter. And we would definitely have homework in between each week. Stuff to do before the lesson and stuff after the lesson to do as well. So for example, we would know exactly what we're going to do each week, and we would have to look up in the textbook the stuff before, revise for a specific test, and then afterwards we would get homework to consolidate, and then of course have to do the pre-prep for the next week. So even though it was only 1 hour a week, we were definitely encouraged to do much more during the week than I would for my Latin, which makes sense because otherwise you're barely doing any Greek. But I think as always the case, if you have fewer contact hours, even if you're expected to do the stuff otherwise, it is much easier to slip because there's no direct culpability the whole time. If you don't do it and it suddenly gets to the day before your weekly lesson, you haven't done it yet, you know, there just aren't as many checkpoints as there is for the Latin. You're there every single day. I really did enjoy the Latin, I thought that was brilliant. The Greek less so, but I think that's maybe just to do with the fact that it's only once a week, so you don't feel like you can get in the same rhythm, knowing the teacher, knowing the class as well. Because just as you're getting used to it, it's then stopped for another 6 days, and then you just have 1 hour again, and then it's stopped for 6 days. But completely fine. Now let's talk about the tutorials that I would have within my college, and also the one essay a week. My essay was due on a Tuesday at 5 PM, and then the tutorial would be at Wednesday at 5 PM. So that means 1 day a week, we had no work to do for these tutorials, because the essay was handed in, we wouldn't be set the next one yet, and that was kind of blissful, because that means at least 1 day a week you cannot work on that. Maybe you'll do some language stuff, but that was a nice break. The routine I kind of got into was my weekend would kind of be from Tuesday 5 PM to Thursday 5 PM. Those 2 days, Tuesday to Wednesday and Wednesday to Thursday, would be my weekend days, because you would have nothing to do on the Tuesday, maybe do a bit of language stuff, and then I would have this Greek class on the Thursday, and then I had my Latin class, which was every day, and then after that I felt I was kind of done for the week. And this is definitely very common. There's this weird concept in Oxford that everyone's weekend is at a different point. It's basically the 2 days, or 1 day if you're very stressed, after your essay or your problem sheet or your work for that week is sent in. And what that means was, on the actual weekend, Saturday, Sunday, I was often really in the essay grind to submit it in for the next Tuesday. So the weekend, I was probably working more than, for example, Tuesday night. But that was fine. Tuesday was quite a stressful day because you have to get the essay in for 5 o'clock. And I would always leave myself in a position where that was possible, but I was working for the whole of Tuesday on the essay pretty much. And I didn't get any late. I was always in on time. But Tuesday was definitely the 1 day of a week I felt stressed, and I felt I had to have a quick lunch or maybe take fewer breaks, depending on the week, to get the essay in. But doable. And I like the fact that all of our essays were on the same topic. So all on different parts of the Iliad. One of them might be about gender in the Iliad. One of them is about how we depict mortals and immortal characters. All of these kind of things were kind of brought together, so I felt after it we have a really good sense of the Iliad. Which is another brilliant thing about the course. Because in other subjects, like history, I know they just have to get through much more, and so each week or each essay is basically about something else, and they're just darting through it too quickly. So a lot of my historian friends tell me it's kind of frustrating, and they can't spend as long, and the fact that we are doing the same thing for basically 8 weeks, which in this case was the Iliad, which is this Greek text, means you can prep better in advance. Because I knew if I just learnt the Iliad really well, then it would help me, put me in great stead for the whole term, which again, I think is something that you don't get in subjects like history. Because they go over such a broad thing, even within one term, you can't prep so well in advance and cover yourself for the whole term. And that's something I knew in advance about classics, or at least I hoped. So I talked about the Iliad a lot in my personal statement, because I thought if I knew that well, it would put me in great stead, and also be useful because they're likely to accept me for the course, more so if I talk about something like the Iliad, which is so key to the course than something else. And that's been brilliant, because I felt that can only be a useful thing if you know how to prepare in advance and you can prepare well in advance. And I do think classics has just the right balance of lots of variety in different things. You have the literature, you have the language classes, you have the ancient history we do, but at the same time, when it comes down to it, it's very clear what to do and you go into great detail. So the literature this term was about one book, and I think that's a brilliant way round, because lots of other subjects, maybe they have to go through so much that you just never learn anything that well. I've not felt that with classics at all. So that was the essays, and then it would come to the tutorials. What was interesting about the essays is that they would only be marked and given back to us after the tutorials, as opposed to what I was expecting in advance of the tutorial, and in the tutorial we would then talk about the essay that we've done, which bits they liked, which bits they didn't like. And what this meant was that the tutorial often felt very separate to the essay we'd done, and it was more about the topic in general, as opposed to the specific take we'd concluded in our essays on the subject. But that was kind of useful. So for example, if the topic was the gods, and we talked about specific instances with the gods early on in the book, but we missed out a few key important parts that were later on, our tutor would then tell us in the tutorial all about the stuff we missed. Which means at the end, after our essay and after our tutorial, we kind of have a full picture. The tutorial would kind of be used to fill in the gaps we missed, as opposed to focus and go into more depth about the stuff we covered. It took me a few weeks to understand this and get used to it. So for the first few tutorials, I was definitely a bit confused about what was going on, because for some reason in my head it was going to be the other thing, which was this idea that you debate with your tutor about what you've written. And so I was a bit confused. None of it was really what I talked about in the essay. But once you understand what a tutorial is about, at least in this specific tutor's case, how he structures his tutorials with his students, you can take a lot more out of it. And I would say that's the same for the other tutorials, which were only every other week. Once you understand what the tutor's about and what they're trying to get out of it for you from the tutorials, you can pick up a lot more. And again, I feel very lucky that we have the same tutor every single week. Because although everyone in Oxford has tutors and tutorials every week, depending on your subject and your options, you may switch between tutors. So one week, in week 1, you see this tutor, and in week 2, for the same kind of paper, you'll see a different tutor because the essay is different, and in week 3, a third tutor. For us, I felt we could really get to understand our tutor, our tutors could get to understand us, and we could understand kind of how to best get stuff out of the tutorial. But, like I say, I've only had 8 tutorials, so I don't know how much that will vary, and next term it might be very different. Our tutor was also just very calm about things, which was very good. If people ever needed extensions or cancellations because they were ill or something, the tutor was always very happy to give, which was brilliant. And actually there were 3 people in our tutorials, and one person every time would do a slightly shorter essay, which was called a commentary instead. So that means out of the 8 weeks, roughly a third, that doesn't quite make a whole number, but you would have a slightly easier task for that week because you're writing a commentary, which is kind of talking about one specific passage in more detail about the topic, as opposed to you find your own quotes from throughout the book about the topic. It's just a slightly different thing, but that was also nice because you knew every third week you would have a bit of a chiller week. And also in first week, he didn't even give us anything to do, which was brilliant in terms of submitting stuff. Because our tutorial was on Wednesday, he didn't make us at the end of Freshers Week rush an essay on Monday and Tuesday to submit for 5 PM for the next Wednesday. So that was brilliant. I actually only had 7 pieces of written work to submit, and maybe 2 of them were commentaries anyway, maybe 3, can't remember how the maths worked for me. And so that was very chill, as opposed to other people who maybe have stricter tutors, who would mean they had to do stuff in first week, and maybe they have to do these 2,000 word pieces, as opposed to a few 1,500 word pieces as well. But let's talk about the tutors and the professors. This is something that makes Oxford amazing. Just like this tutor was always so kind, knew us very well, could adapt, everyone I felt like that was. My Greek teacher, who's actually a PhD student, one time I had a question at the end of class and I just asked him for 30 seconds about some grammatical thing, whatever it was. And he was like, oh, I'm not too sure. And I was like, oh, don't worry, it's just a question, it's not that important. And this was the first week. And I assumed I would go, that would be fine, we see each other next week. But half an hour later, I got an email back from this guy who had looked up the question in a textbook, found it, whatever, sent me a scanned PDF of the answer, annotated it, gone through it, whatever, and I thought that was amazing. I didn't even think this guy would have remembered who I was that I'd asked the question, because it's the first class, the first time we'd met. And from that moment, you really get the sense that these teachers and tutors and professors really care about you, which is brilliant, and I don't think that can be the case at every uni. Our essays get marked on Microsoft Word. This tutor, the really calm one, would add comments all the way through. And not only does this tutor sometimes insert articles as a comment about, yes, this is good, you could look at this specific article which wasn't on the reading list but I found for you because it goes into it in more detail. Because the comments on Microsoft Word have a timestamp, you can see how long they're spending on your essay. And it's really not a quick mark. It's not as if they just go through good, yes, no, whatever, and they're done. These tutors often spend 40, 45, 50 minutes from the start to the end reading your essay, which is incredible. I just think that's brilliant, because of course it takes us way longer, but it really gives the sense that these tutors actually care about what you're writing and will actually look at it for you and really take close consideration. So I really could not be more impressed with any of that stuff. I thought that was brilliant. One thing I heard when I was applying for interviews was that you can sometimes bring ideas to your tutor about the subject that they've never heard before, and you know, you can really inspire them just as they inspire you, and it's this conversation between intellectuals. And so far, maybe that's just because it's first term and we're not very good yet, but I would say that's pretty overrated and just doesn't really happen. It's maybe happened a few times, but probably not because we've given the best answer. It's probably because we've given a bit of a rubbish, crap answer and the tutor's like, oh, maybe, haven't thought about that before. But it's really not the case. For me, what a tutorial really is, as I've said, the tutor filling in the gaps that you missed. And so, yeah, not that I didn't get a lot out of these early tutorials, but once I understood this, as opposed to the preconceived notion of what a tutorial should be, I think I got a lot more out of them for the rest of the term. And so, to conclude, for the academic stuff, the work is tough, absolutely, and there's a lot of hours you have to put in, but I've been so impressed. Classics in particular is a thing that is particularly famous at Oxbridge, and to be honest, particularly Oxford, and it does show. A lot of the textbooks are written for our course, the classics course, and the way it structures the exams. The vocab lists and the textbooks and the set texts are based on the texts that the Oxford course uses. And I've just felt this kind of thing throughout, which is the course is made for us. And it's brilliant. Everything is so smooth. They've thought of every single possibility. It's tough. It really is tough. But I really could not be more impressed. And I have gears to go into in terms of working harder, working smarter, making better essays for sure. But I'm so sure, course-wise, that it's the best place for me, if I can cope with it and carry on coping with it, which I'm sure I can. But for this specific part, I cannot speak more highly. Okay, so I'm filming this on a separate occasion, but let's go on to the second part of the video, how the lifestyle was as an Oxford student, everything apart from the work. We'll talk about the people, my specific college, Oxford as a city in general, the social life, all of that kind of stuff. But starting with the people, the thing that gets asked so much is everyone in Oxford really weird and or really clever? And surprisingly, maybe for some of you, my answer is no, especially to the question, is everyone really clever? It's a weird thing because I guess everyone's courses are so hard, people are struggling so much of the time, they're staying up late to get work done, they're maybe quite burnt out and stuff like that, that it seems that everyone is kind of the opposite. Because everyone looks like they're struggling, you assume everyone else is not very clever, which is clearly not the case, and these people will all be super smart and super deserving of their places. But I find that quite funny. When you look at people for the first time, and if someone was to come into Oxford, you might think the opposite of people being really smart. You would think, who are these guys? Why are they struggling so much? But in terms of the question, is everyone really weird? That's also not the case. Most people are just normal enough people who kind of, I guess, enjoy school or enjoy their subject, and so have got into a great uni for it. Which again, maybe goes along with the idea of why people here just looking so normal. They don't look particularly clever. They aren't intimidatingly intelligent just by looking at them or speaking to them. They just seem like normal enough people. But yeah, that's really how I would conclude this. That people are just generally quite normal. I've had a few conversations with people about their subject, and that's when you start to realise how much they actually really do know and how they are really smart and are really diligent and really care about their course. So in my interview video, where I was interviewing some of my friends about their subject, after one of the guys came on, we actually spoke. He just stayed in my room for a bit, and this guy does material science, which is obviously a STEM subject, but I wasn't even really sure what it was, and he just spoke to me about what material science Mathski really is, what it means, what he does, and at that time you start to realise how much people really do know. And at that point you think, wow, everyone here really knows what they're talking about. But on the surface, if you're just hanging out with people in the evening or for dinner or whatever, they're just normal enough people. Conversation isn't really about work. You just get on with people normally. But there's also a range within the type of people that exist. For example, in terms of how much people are obsessed with the Oxbridge lifestyle, how much they were absolutely sure that they wanted to go here and only here, all that kind of stuff. And maybe for you guys who are watching this, if you're applying to Oxford, maybe you're one of the more keen people because you're watching channels like this. And I was certainly the same. As you know, I reapplied because I really wanted to go, so much so that I was willing to risk it going for a second time. But it surprised me that not everyone is like this. Some people are just naturally very good at their subject, put down 4 unis and Oxford as a 5th, and got in and just decided to go there. And of course they would have worked really hard in their application, but if they went somewhere else or they didn't get in, they would have been absolutely fine with that. And of course, there are some people who are obsessed with going to Oxford or Cambridge or the Oxbridge lifestyle. This was always their plan since the age of 11, and it's kind of weird seeing both types of people. The key thing is, no matter how much someone wants it or didn't want it or only wanted it late on in sixth form or whatever, that has no bearing on how capable people are for the course. And so people in all camps do just as well as each other, and it's not the case that in order to do really well you have to want it a lot, and the other way around, just because you want it a lot doesn't mean you'll do really well. As was the case for me. I really wanted it, but I got rejected the first time, so I know firsthand that it doesn't work like that. But I found that strange, because my preconception was definitely that everyone there was going to be just as obsessed as me. If they didn't get in that time, they would have taken gap years and reapplied themselves. Everyone's obsessed with Oxford. But again, just people are a bit more casual about it and a bit more normal than that most of the time. There are definitely people like that, and there are the people that are complete opposite. So whether people are intelligent or not, or seem intelligent or not, the things that contribute to people doing well at Oxbridge and getting in, so probably enjoying their subjects at school, working hard at them, probably leads to other things in their personality, for example, big quirks. So as much as people are definitely normal, there are probably more people that are very quirky and unusual and have something to them that makes them, a very unique person than you would maybe get at other unis. I definitely feel like loads of people that I've met in my college, I've never met anyone like them in my life for various reasons. Just they have something going on that just makes them very unique. And that's a really cool thing, because it feels like you're meeting very interesting people. Interesting both in terms of they know what they're doing for their subject, but also their personality, the hobbies that they like to do, the things they're really interested in outside of their subject, often are equally as wild and wonderful as, I guess, the knowledge for their subject has to be. And I do actually want to do some more videos with my friends, and these kind of people in particular, next term, because I think this is really cool. This is really what makes Oxford, Oxford. It's the people, especially the interesting people. So do stay tuned, because I'm going to try and work out some fun ways to get these really wacky people onto the channel and make some content together. I took a gap year. I don't feel that there's any problem or any stigma about being a year older than other people. Many other people also took gap years. I don't think too many people reapplied, to be honest. I think they were always planning on taking a gap year, or they applied deferred, or even if they didn't apply deferred, they just applied for the first time during their gap year. But it makes absolutely no difference. People don't care if you've reapplied, if you applied to a different college and got pulled to this one. It's not an issue at all. And actually, in my specific college, there are lots of people who are older. There's a group of Singaporeans. We have a lot of Singaporeans in our college for whatever reason. And all the men in Singapore have to do conscription. So all these guys doing a range of subjects, law, history, biochemistry, whatever, all of them are at least 21 or maybe even 22, because they came out of school, then they had to do 2 years of conscription, and now they're coming to Oxford. So these guys are even older than me, and they're just undergrads first years. So there really is a big range. At the start of the year, we also had, I think, 3 17-year-olds, and that's for various reasons. Maybe they're international students from different countries that do education a year early, so they're done, or various other reasons. But we have undergrads from the age of at least 17 to 21, which is very funny, but it makes absolutely no difference. And people just chat to whoever. So I definitely feel much more like a first year, which I am, than a second year, even though those guys are, on average, more likely to be the same age as me or the same year group during school. That really is not a problem, and you just hang out with your cohort. On that note of mixing between the years, I don't think there's been much so far, at least for me personally. It does feel a bit like you're the new guys, and these guys have already been there, done that. Which is interesting, because we've only done 8 weeks, and to think about these guys had only done basically 3 terms, and we've already done 1 term, makes you think, already at this point, maybe they're not so omniscient as they seem. Especially since so much of it would have been in COVID, they maybe would have done it at home, they weren't even in the college, all of that kind of stuff, didn't bond as a year group. But there's been bits and bobs of it, but I don't know too many second years, to be honest. And Trinity, my college, has the first years and the second years on site, and the rest of the years off site. So it's only us around, and you feel you know half the people more or less, and then the other half, the second years, you tend not to know that well. Of course you know a few, but I wonder if that will change in the future, and I'll personally get to know more second years, become friendly with them. Because right now, it maybe feels a bit like it was at least in my school, where it was, your year is your year, and you don't hang out with the other years. Which I don't think it should be like in uni, and maybe isn't always the case, so maybe that will change. So that's kind of everything to do with the people. Now let's move on to talk about the college, the collegiate system, what my college, Trinity, is really like. My teachers, when I was applying, always said, kind of, just pick a college. You'll enjoy all of them, don't worry too much. Whichever college you go to, you'll feel like will be your home. And I really don't think I agree with that. I think, even only after 1 term, college decision is a massive thing, and it really will impact your Oxford experience. At least last term, I've spent the majority of my time in my college. You work in the college libraries, you hang out with your college friends, you're on the college grounds, and not all colleges are created equal. Some of them are much bigger, some of them have nicer resources, and all of these kind of things actually do matter. Trinity's fine. It's the fourth smallest in terms of the people, I've heard. The grounds, I think, are, again, maybe slightly smaller than average, but relatively nice and green. So college decision, when you're applying to Oxford, is this very weird dynamic of being something that is actually really super important and will massively change your Oxford experience, but also at the same time, you basically have to pick blind, because as much as you can choose a big college, a small college, one with loads of people, little people, greenery, whatever, at the end of the day, it's just going to come down to when you're there and you really understand what it's like to be at that college, whether it's your kind of thing or not. The reason I picked my college is because it was really close to the classics faculty, which is super useful because I have to be there every single day for my Latin lessons. And in general, I'm relatively happy with my college pick. The grounds are quite nice, especially the front quad, which is where a lot of this filming has been done before that I've showed in various videos. But there's also plenty of things that can be improved about my college that maybe other colleges would have better. For example, there's so much building work going on our college right now. So there's always things chopping and changing. They're redoing the library, which is just outside my window. So every morning there are workers that work very early on the library, which is fine, but it wakes you up. Similarly, the workspace that we kind of used last term is this temporary building, so it definitely felt a bit higgledy-piggledy and not as if this was the college's final form. And I wonder if that will ever be the case, or just next year they'll have done these things and they're renewing these things, and basically there's always something that's always being done. I don't think that's the case, and I hope not as well. But I'm only on college site for 2 years, first year and second year as I said, because the rest of the years you live off-site. And okay, fine, you can still come back into the college, but it's not the same. You won't be there 24/7, living there, eating there, socialising there. So I hope I see Trinity College proper without any of the cranes and the stuff blocking off the building works. I hope I can see what the college really looks like at some point. And I guess this is something more for next term's review, but next term they're going to do the dining hall and the beer cellar and everything like that apparently. So that's all going to be closed. So that's going to be weird, and I think we're going to be eating in this temporary building, which might be very strange. But in general, I would say the Trinity resources are maybe slightly worse than the average college. For example, our kitchen is very small, and there's only one for everyone. Other colleges in Oxbridge would have kitchens every staircase, like a proper kitchen, and that seems absolutely ludicrous for us. I cannot fathom an Oxbridge experience where that's actually the case. It basically renders cooking impossible for us, because there's always so many people who want to use it, and you're forced to either eat in hall or get a meal deal or something like that. And college food, there we go, maybe that's fine then, doesn't matter, you just get your food in the dining hall every day. Trinity apparently pride themselves on really great food, and I have done a few videos about the special occasions, but in general, I would actually also say I'm pretty underwhelmed by the food. As someone who tends to eat the vegetarian stuff, I just think sometimes there isn't the best selection. As opposed to the meats, there'll be like 5 meat options, which is brilliant for them, but if the one veggie option doesn't feel that great for you, it's a shame, there's not much to do really. It also seems slightly expensive. I don't know how other colleges do it, but you pay for your main course and then you pay for the sides. And each side, you know, if you get your 77p side and it's broccoli, sometimes you don't get that many broccoli, and it just kind of puts me in a bad mood when I feel like I'm being ripped off for like a few bits of vegetables or something like that. But also sometimes you get loads of vegetables and then happy days. I just feel it's very inconsistent, the dining hall, especially as a vegetarian, so I tend not to actually go that much. And I try and just make sandwiches in my room, not in the kitchen really. But I guess that's worked fine for me, and it probably saves me money anyway. But one thing I do have to give credit for is the fact that you can kind of pay as you go, so that is an option for me. Because at other colleges, they just give you a lump sum at the start, and they say your meals are now free for the term because you've paid in advance. And if you eat one meal, or if you eat every meal, you still have to pay that fee. For us, we can chop and change, which is useful. There is technically a booking system, which means that you have to kind of book your meals in advance, and that is slightly tedious, but it's not too annoying, and in general, it's fine. The nice events, the formals, are also pretty good when you go. I get the vegetarian stuff, they cater for me absolutely fine, no issues, and I have really enjoyed that. The criticism people have about that is that the spaces are very limited, so it's very hard to get tickets, because they come out midnight on the system, and you've got to be up to book it straight away. And if you don't do that, you can't get a seat. And there's only normal food or formal food every night. So if you don't get on the formal, which admittedly is the same price, so that's not the issue, just the point is in general, you can't get food from the hall that night. In other colleges, they'll have normal food every single night, and then they'll have formals as well. And it means if you miss a formal, it doesn't matter, because if your aim is just to be fed, you can just get the normal food that night. But every college does it differently, and Trinity says it's the same price no matter what, formal or not, and then just restrict the capacity. This kind of thing, the same price but hard to get in, versus you can pay extra but you're guaranteed to have the same food as normal if you want, is a kind of thing that you just can't know about every college before you pick one, and it kind of does make quite a big impact on your Oxford experience. But it's fine, it works for me. With the accommodation in Trinity, everyone pays the same in first year, no matter if you get the best room in college or the worst. And that is probably pretty good, because it just makes it fair in that regard. But I would say my room is definitely below average in terms of size and stuff like that this year. I don't really need a massive room, it suits me fine. I've got a single bed and it's not an ensuite, as opposed to other freshers' rooms, which are sometimes double bed and ensuite. Maybe have a bigger desk as well, more light coming in, whatever. But I found plenty of things that I do like about my room. For example, within my staircase, I'm on the floor with the showers. So in my floor, it's literally just me as a student room, and then there are just the showers and some tutorial rooms as well. But that means it kind of in a way feels like I've got an ensuite, because as opposed to other people having to get properly dressed, go up or down the stairs to the showers and then go back down to their room, I can just nip across and it's about 6 steps away from my showers. So in some ways I feel like I've got an alright room. And the fact that I'm the only room means I can make as much noise as I want really when making YouTube videos, which I guess is alright. And yeah, maybe I would like a bigger room, especially one with more light, a nicer background to put when I'm filming YouTube videos. You can really see Oxford behind me. But what to do? It's absolutely fine. So there's always a trade-off. One other thing I want to mention is this idea of scouts. Scouts are kind of, I guess, people who kind of clean your room and look after it and all that kind of stuff. And they come in every day to empty your bins and stuff like that. And that is really nice. I really do appreciate that. I think everyone does. Because it also means that someone, I guess, comes into your room every day and checks up on you to make sure you're doing fine. I'm normally actually at my Latin lesson, so I don't tend to see my scout. But that's just something I wanted to mention. And I do find very appreciative. Because when I'm making my sandwiches in my room, you know, and I have my packets of cheese or whatever and I put it in the bin, it's nice that it's cleaned every day. I really do appreciate that. But some people say it's bad for the environment because it's always re-emptying the bins and stuff like that. But it's just something I always do appreciate. The grounds are super nice though, and it's really nice once you're in Trinity to walk around, taking a break between work. That's something I've definitely missed being at home in the vacation, not being able to do that, because unfortunately my garden at home is not quite the size of an Oxford college. Who would have thought? Especially not as beautiful with the big trees. You get to see the Oxford buildings, you get to see across the high street, the colleges next door. That is really nice, and that's definitely something I picked Trinity on, because other colleges you just have your quads filled with buildings around and that's kind of it. But this one, it really feels like you have nice kind of green spaces to walk around. The idea of going to a collegiate university versus a city or a campus university is something I can't comment on too much because I simply haven't been to another one. But it feels like you do have a good opportunity to build friends within your college, because you have, in my case, 80 people in your year. In some of the other much bigger colleges, 120, 140 people in a year. But at the same time, this kind of college dynamic, I do think, makes it hard to socialise between colleges, because it's very clear that you're that college, and it's maybe a bit weird to hang out with people from another college if you don't know them before and stuff. Again, maybe that's just something that's in my head, but I always feel that you have a big pool, but because these colleges are quite defined structures and kind of social systems, it feels like there's quite a barrier going over, something that's maybe practically hard to do. And also, if you're trying to hang out with people in the other college, because they'll be with each other every single day, every single night, it can be logistically quite hard to always be there because you can't make spontaneous plans and stuff like that. So there are definitely negatives to a college in that kind of regard as well. Hopefully within the college there'll be people that you can find that you can be good friends with. But it doesn't feel like everyone's equal in Oxford and you can meet everyone at the same point, like maybe it is in other unis where in your accommodation block you could just hang out from someone from a different accommodation block and it makes absolutely no difference. I think maybe in Oxford it's just a bit harder and a bit less common. I definitely don't feel any necessarily big Trinity College camaraderie yet, and I feel like I'm a member of Trinity College, and that's my college. So even though I walk around in that stash, which is that big coat that has my Trinity logo on and my initials, which everyone does, literally you walk around Oxford, well over 3/4 of the people will be in their college stash. For one Trinity party, I was dressed up as someone from a different college, Balliol. It doesn't really matter the context. But I definitely didn't feel weird, and I was thinking to myself, oh, you know, maybe I would quite like to go to Balliol. I definitely don't feel like Trinity is my college yet, but I'm sure that will change, because it's only been one term, so I'm sure I'll get more comfortable and feel that Trinity specifically is a home that works for me, and I love it, and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully that'll happen. It's definitely not like a school, where school creates all these events for you, and you go to assembly or you have these school trips or whatever, and you feel like you're a unit. It feels like in Trinity College, everyone's just a student, and yeah, of course you're mates with the other students, but everyone's doing your own thing, and everyone has to make their own fun. There aren't that many, at least in Trinity, college-wide events that really unites everyone and makes you feel like you're the Trinity student body or the Trinity group together. That's my personal opinion, and there have definitely been some good stuff that are organised by the students, but there's nothing done by the college, close to almost literally zero, and I don't think that's the point of a college, so I don't think that's rare. I just think that's always the case. The college doesn't do much in that regard, and so you have to make your own fun. What I hear is colleges that are slightly further out from the centre do that more, because maybe they feel they're slightly more isolated from the rest of the Oxford colleges, so they want to make a really great community. So some of my friends in the fringe colleges like St Hugh's and St Hilda's tell me that that's definitely something that happens more than I've personally experienced. But again, it is what it is, and there's pros and cons, which is I can leave my college whenever I want and be in central Oxford, go to the central libraries with some friends, do this, do that. But yeah, I guess that kind of finishes the social and Oxford lifestyle part of the review. I would say less satisfying for me personally last term than the academic stuff was, and definitely room for improvement, and I hope it does improve, but definitely a springboard to jump off from, and there's definitely potential for that to become really good. And then of course there's the stuff that you'll feel at every university, which is you can feel very lonely and isolated. All these people don't know you because you've just moved together. They have no loyalties to you. You're away from home maybe for the first time. You don't feel like you fit in, all that kind of stuff. And of course, all the imposter syndrome at Oxford and stuff like that is a completely separate thing. And also, especially in Oxford, people can definitely big it up to be the best university in the world. The Oxbridge experience is different to any other uni. You feel like you'll enjoy it way more. And then you come there and realise it's a place with all its good things and bad things, just like any other university, and you've bigged it up in your head. You made it, have it to be perfect, and then it's fine, and you feel like it's a letdown. You're letting yourself down because you're not living up to expectations. You're letting your dreams down. You're letting your family down. Whatever it is. But that can happen at every university, where you don't feel like the university days are the best days of your life yet. Especially in first term, that's how it was for me. But everyone must feel that. And if people are telling you they're having the best time at university, 99% of the time, I can guarantee to you, they're lying. They just want to not admit it, or maybe they're just trying to be grateful. But if you feel like this, which almost certainly you will, everyone else is feeling that. And I'm admitting it on camera because I do try to be honest about these things. And everyone I've spoken to on a deep level, after I tell them this, maybe my friends, even if they've just told me 30 seconds before, oh, I'm having the best time, as soon as I tell them, actually, there's definitely stuff that could go better for me, they change up and they say the exact same thing. But there we go. Definitely room for improvement, but I'm sure bits will improve, and as you get more comfortable, it can only get better. But there we go, that's my review of first term. In terms of goals I want to set for myself to make second term better, I think the first one is I want to get out of my college more, and I want to feel like I go to Oxford University as opposed to within this Trinity bubble of sleeping, eating, working, socialising, everything in Trinity, and feeling like you're not really part of the university. So practically, I want to explore more of the Oxford libraries because they're amazing, and if you only go to the Trinity library, which is quite small because it's a small college and possibly even being renovated, I think I'm missing out. Number 2, keep on working consistently at the end of term as at the start. The terms are intense and they're short, so you often feel like you're done or you're near the end before you really are. So for example, at the start of week 6, you might think, oh, you've only got, two weeks left and then it's the last week. You've got 3 weeks, whatever it is. But you're barely past the halfway point in the term. So I want to make sure I'm working and I don't get burnt out all the way through, just so I can keep on at the same pace, slogging through and not just giving up too early, kind of just finishing. And then number 3, I think I tried lots of stuff out last term, but now I need to dial into what I really like. So one of those things might be YouTube this term, and just try and get the most out of one thing. I think that will serve me better than spreading my time quite thinly, doing too much and not really doing any of them properly, different clubs and societies. So there we go. In the review, I've definitely talked about some stuff that's been exquisite and some stuff that's been far from exquisite. But there's always a balance, and that will be very natural for everyone's first term, and probably every term at university. To be honest, I think I would give this term a 6.5 out of 10, which is not particularly high. In my head, maybe a 6 is average. By the time you get to a 7, you had a good term, and I would say I would be somewhere in the middle there. But look, I hope every term can only improve and get better, and I'm sure it will be, because like I say, as you get more familiar, understand more what you want to get out of Oxford, understand how the system works, all that kind of stuff, you can just focus on the things you want to focus and get more out of it, which I'm sure I will. And already after a few weeks of the vacation, I'm feeling much more mentally refreshed and ready to attack the next term and have the best time I possibly can, academically and socially. So there we go. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video, this really long one, and definitely not because I'm just trying to hit my watch hours to get monetized. Now I'm really close to the 1,000 subscribers. But in all seriousness, I hope there was some useful stuff as well. Other things to say, I created an Instagram account recently, so do check that out if you want to. I think I'll just post behind the scenes stuff, outtakes that didn't make the videos, all that kind of stuff. And of course, as I said last time, my DMs are always open on there. So if you want to text privately, as opposed to on the YouTube comments, which I'll also always reply to, feel free to pop over there. And I'm intrigued to see who made it to the end of this video. So if you have, why don't you just leave a comment that says, Sam, your Instagram is really cool, or something, just so I know who's really made it to the end. And I'm expecting 0 comments, but that'll be funny to see. But there we go, that's all I've got to say. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.